Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. You're currently muted right now, and please stay muted during the webinar. Keep in mind that we are recording this to put on the USPA YouTube channel. If you have any questions that you would like to ask Dan, you can write them in the chat, and we will answer them towards the end of the meeting. For those of you who don't know me, my name is George Hargis, and I am the PR and social media manager for the USPA. Our guest today is Dan VC, a world champion skydiver and a founding member of the renowned four-way formation skydiving competitive team, Arizona Airspeed. Dan is currently the manager of Skydive Perris in California, and he's also a highly in-demand coach, author of this book, Above All Else. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it. And he's also a motivational keynote speaker. So, welcome, Dan.
Thanks, George. Great to be here.
I'm so glad you could make it. Today, we're going to be discussing four-way formation skydiving as a competitive discipline. It is currently and historically the most attended event at the USPA National Championships. USPA thought it would be helpful for those of you who are training for the competition to get some insider tips from Dan, who is incredibly knowledgeable on the topic. So, Dan, back in 2012, you wrote a 6-part series for Parachutist Magazine called On the Line, Succeeding in Four-Way. And we've put those up on the USPA competition resources page. So for those of you who haven't read them, I highly recommend that you do. The first issue is June 2012, and then each issue is the next month after. But Dan, in the first part of the series, you talk about flying on the line. And can you tell us what that term means?
Yeah, on the line is it's a term that we came up with for like the peak performance state of mind. Similar to more common ones are being in flow or being in the zone. That place where you're calm enough, you're aware of everything that's going on, you're confident, you're not overthinking, those times where it all just works. You're trusting your instincts. And I know we've all had jumps, and all the teams I know have had jumps where they've just landed and said, man, that was perfect. That was it. That's where we want to be. That's it. That's the stuff right there. But then they haven't spent time often defining what that is and really thinking about what made that happen. They just think we just got lucky on that jump and it was a great jump. But when your team, and as individually and as an entire team, is right on the line, you are being able to be as aggressive as possible while keeping it completely under control. So if you are over the line, is when it's just too aggressive. It's not under control. It gets rough. It gets frantic. It wastes a lot of time. Or under the line would be more of where people are scared. They don't want to screw up. They're being too cautious, and they may be, doing everything correctly, but it's just not anywhere near as much fun, and it's certainly not your best. And being right on the line is when you're just going as confidently and as strong as you can, but you're keeping it completely under control. And it's the mental state of mind. And one thing that's really important about it is, even for teams, regardless of the level, if you're a beginning team and you're averaging 6 points, but that's your best 6 points, or a team doing 10, or a team doing 16 or 20, the mental state of mind that you want to be in, being right on the line, is pretty much the same for all of those. Even as your skydiving performance changes, the mental approach to it and the mental state of mind is much the same. So it's something that you want to be thinking about right from the start. Don't wait till the competition and then try to discover it then. Be aware of it right from the beginning.
That's a great way to describe it. And my next question is, if I'm, a skydiver that's trying to get better and trying to get myself closer to flying on the line, what are some questions I can kind of ask myself after a jump to know, to get closer to that point of flying on the line?
Well, you have to realize that, as I started to mention before, how you approach the jump is up to you, right? It's our jump. It's your team's jump. How you want to do it is up to you. People think sometimes it's just a matter of luck again, that it was a bad jump or a good jump. And when you have those best jumps, really taking the time to define and think about what happened, what was different on that jump, what made that work. And pretty universally, with all the different competitors I've known and teams that I've worked with and been a part of, the things that are universal is we are very calm. You may be physically moving fast, you may be physically aggressive, but you're mentally very calm, very quiet. You're not overanalyzing, you're not overthinking. You're trusting your instincts. You're trusting that you'll do the right thing if you're calm enough and you see everything that's happening. And you're moving with confidence, because you can be calm and seeing everything, but not confident. And when you're right on the line, it's all right there. And because it is, you're moving with the full power and confidence that you deserve. So think about, and we're going to talk, I think, one thing that I've used as a tool to put yourself on the line is something I call the 4 C's. And it's calm, communication, control, and confidence. And this is just a process of how to learn to put yourself on the line. And it all starts with calm. As we know, it's not natural to be calm when we're jumping out of airplanes. We don't jump out of airplanes because it's such a calming, soothing, mellow experience. It's more high adrenaline, and we generally like it like that. But to be able to perform at your best, you have to be very, very calm. Your mind has to be very quiet. And it's not the normal place to be. And this is the same for students, right? How many times have instructors told students, calm down, calm down. It's like the craziest thing you can say. I'm about to jump out of an airplane. How am I going to be calm? And it's the same thing for competitors. I'm getting ready to exit. I'm competing. How do I be calm? Well, you need to train yourself to be calm. So you want to practice doing this. Practice breathing, quieting your mind, not thinking about the details, be in control of your thoughts, be in control of your energy. The second C is communication. So when you exit the airplane, in formation skydiving, communication is key. We need to see everything that's going on, and we need to see that our teammates also see it. We're making decisions constantly in a fraction of a second. And we're making those decisions together. There could be something that's a little bit off, and we recognize it. We recognize that our teammates see it, and we're fixing things all the time. We also see sometimes that everything's right on the money, and we know now is when we can push it. We're right on target. We can push it. So you're making decisions, you're fixing things, you're communicating constantly. And that communication is the second C. So with each jump, you exit calm, you establish communication. That communication then gives you control. And that's basically what I was just describing. You're seeing everything that's going on. Because you see it and your teammates see it, you're able to keep it under control. Where it could be, something is about to funnel, but everybody sees it and you save it, you fix it. If everybody doesn't see it, it funnels and the jump is over. So calm, communication, control. Then the 4th C is confidence. Many times I see teams establish control. They've got control. They look great. They look technically perfect, but they're still going at half the speed they're capable of. And you need to choose during those moments. We're on it. We have the control we need, and choose to be confident. And those are the 4 C's, and that's kind of the definition of the line and how to get there.
That's awesome. That's a lot of really good information. Yeah. Other than flying on the line, you talked about in your first article, a team deciding on a goal to focus on. And what are some examples, or an example of a goal besides winning, right? Is there other goals that a team can set for themselves?
There are many goals a team can set, and they should make sure that they are in agreement with what those goals are. It's all right for individuals to have their own goals with the team, but those own goals have to only be achieved by the team achieving the team's goals. And for every team, the goal is to have a good time. I mean, the goal is to have a great time. This is, I hear people talk about fun jumpers sometimes, like that's a different breed, but who isn't a fun jumper? Why would you jump out of an airplane if you're not having a great time? This isn't a particularly smart thing to do. It's really stupid if you're not having a great time. And your first goal should always be to have fun with your friends, to make some great skydives, to enjoy doing it. So what's different then with different teams is what they call fun, right? There's many of us who have competed hardcore, and there's not that many. It's a small community of the people who have really competed hard and trained hard. And we think it's fun to feel like we're going to puke before we get out of the airplane in round one of the competition. We think it's fun to have to be right on the edge, pushing ourselves to be the best that we can be and to be there every time. It's sick, but we think that's fun. And so for all the hardcore competitors, that's something that you learn to enjoy. But it can be just for a team too. You just want to improve. I mean, every skydiver I know wants to get better. They can say that they're not competitors or whatever, but they're always competing with themselves. And they want to get better because it's so much more fun. The better you get, the better you can fly, the more fun it is. And that's the primary goal for everybody and any team. Even if you just have a few friends, you only can do, maybe 50 jumps before the meet. Well, you're gonna improve. Just jumping together gives you the opportunity to improve. And you're gonna have a great time doing it. That can be the entire goal. Or the goal can be, for me, what it usually is now, is just throw a team together for the nationals and just go have a great time with no expectations at all, other than we're going to try to do our best because it's more fun when we can, but we haven't practiced. We don't care. There's nothing invested here. So fun is the first goal, and then figuring out what that means to everybody and what they are committing to achieve that goal. And if it's to be loose and to have a good time, then you're committing to not getting stressed out when you guys have bad jumps. That's part of the plan.
That's such great advice for the team to agree on. Like, yeah, we don't care. We just want to have fun, or we want to improve, or, just having like a team agreement on something. I think
it is really good, because then you show up at the meet and suddenly they care, and you have to remind them, hey, we promised we didn't care.
Yeah.
Don't start now.
Promise we weren't going to get stressed out.
Exactly.
So being on a team, you always are trying to fly your best, have the good skydiving skills, but what would you consider another trait of being a good teammate?
To be a good teammate, you want to do the best you can do in your contribution to the team. So obviously that means one thing in the air. You want to fly your best. You want to do your best. You want to be the best flyer that you can be. But it's not all about you. And how good you can be is only equivalent to how good your team can be. And how good your team can be is only equivalent to how good your teammates can become. So you always want to be doing everything you can to be able to help and support your teammates. And this goes for everybody. There's, most teams are people with more similar experience levels. And they've all got something they can contribute to each other. It may not always be advice. You shouldn't just throw out advice that you're not really sure you're correct on, because people usually will listen and follow it when it was wrong. Okay, so you don't want to necessarily just throw advice out there. That's not what I mean by seeing what you can do to help. But being supportive of each other, setting the best example that you can, cheering people on when they do great, sometimes lift them up if they need after they've had a bad jump, and it'll come back to you also. I've done several jumps where I was the player coach, where I was way more experienced than everybody else on the team. But there still was so much I could learn from them. There was still much they could support me with. So you have to be there for your teammates on the ground and in the air.
That's really good advice. Kind of backing up a little bit, but it goes into this. You were talking, part of the 4 C's was communication. And obviously in free fall, we can't talk to each other. So give me an example of what communication with your teammate looks like.
We can
in the air and then also on the ground.
We can absolutely talk to each other in free fall. It's amazing, especially with formation skydiving team. One of the keys is, and everybody's heard it, is good eye contact. Whenever you can, you want to be looking your teammates in the eyes, seeing what they're thinking, seeing what they're feeling. And you're constantly, that level of communication, I spoke about it before with the 4 C's, you're constantly making decisions together, right? And they could be emotional decisions as much as they are fix something in the skydive that's going wrong, to you're physically fixing a problem or accelerating if it's going well. It could also be, I remember, Kirk Werner was my teammate with Airspeed when we started. Kirk's the captain of the current US 8-way team. And man, there was times where I admit it, I was scared. I was scared. I was trying to be right on the line. I knew where I wanted to be, but I came out the door and I was scared. No problem there. But I'd look across it. We'd get the jump going. I'd look across and see Kirk sometimes and see the fire and energy in his eyes and him just in a glance, in hundredths of a second of looking his eyes, looking at me with like, let's go, come on. And just motivated me to be the best I can be and to shift into gear right then and to get over the fears that I was having. There is not, if we sat down and talked about it for an hour, he couldn't have said as much as he did in that fraction of a second glance. And having that communication is one of the coolest things about being on a team in skydiving. It's like a 7th sense, past a 6th sense. It's great.
That's awesome. I think I've definitely experienced that in skydiving, and it is like a 7th sense, like we don't really talk about, but I think it's super important. Okay, so moving on to the next series of the articles that you wrote. Actually, the 3rd part of the series, you start specifically talking about ways to train for the skydives. And you start talking about the random formations. And for those of you who don't know 4-way, we can talk about randoms versus blocks at the end. But you talk about in random formation drills, teams can work on doing stop drills. And this is something I had never heard of before. So can you tell us what a stop drill is?
Yeah. A stop drill is a chance to practice every little detail of a move from one formation to the next. So rather than just going through the move as one entire thing, you break it down to all the parts. And you stop, the parts starting from the key. All right, so the key comes, everybody moves to the position in the next formation confidently, with energy, not racing, but not cautiously, right? Not cautiously. Everybody moves right to where they're supposed to be. While they're moving there, they're looking across at each other the whole time. So they can see, they're aware of everybody on the jump. They're seeing everything. The tendency is always for people to look at their grips too soon, right? You've heard this before. Don't chase your grip, don't look at your grip. And we talk about it all the time, but then everybody does it anyway. So you're not allowed to look at the grip. You're not allowed to take the grip. You have to look across and you see the entire transition. You see what it looks, you see what the next formation looks like when you're halfway there, right? And you're becoming aware of everything. You stop completely in the position of the next formation and you get a photograph in your mind of what that formation looks like, the perfect position, not close, not where it's good enough, but the perfect spot, what it looks like when your precision is right on. Then when the center picks up their grips, everybody practices picking up a grip, and a grip that you'd want to fly a piece with, not a sloppy grip. Take a good grip on a stop drill, take the good grip. And then you're also, when you're in the transition, and by the time it stops before you have the grip, you can see that this formation is going to be done. It's something I call the pre-finished picture in the article, where this is done, this is guaranteed. And right then is when you want to start training yourself to anticipate, right? Most people don't practice anticipating. They plan to think of the next point when the key comes, but that's not anticipating. Anticipating is knowing what you need to do before it's time to do it. So there should be a moment where you shift and your mind goes to the next point. And that is when the one you're doing is guaranteed. So for that, it can be guaranteed far before it's complete. You can tell during the transition and when everybody stopped that it's going to be done. So during the stop drills, you have time to train yourself to anticipate, to train yourself to think of the next point. Then you stop, the center gets on, everybody takes good grips, you're ready to go, you brake when the center breaks and everybody's moving. So you've practiced the anticipation, you've practiced the sharp move, you've practiced the awareness throughout the entire transition, you've practiced the good stop, you've learned what it looks like during the transition and what it looks like when it's complete. You've practiced taking good grips, you've practiced the key. So you practiced each one of these things. And once you've practiced them like that, you've really learned all these pictures, you've learned all these habits, this discipline, and it's easy then to start moving through this. Basically, the transition we call that level one, right? The stop drill I call level one. And basically on that, you're going to spend enough time stopped that you basically have a no contact formation that the judges could score. You're going to park in there and think about, we're going to stay off grips long enough that they could score this. All right. And practicing each one of these things. On level two, you do the exact same thing, but you don't stay off grips. You're looking as much, you're stopping as much, you're anticipating as much, but rather than stopping and staying off the grips, as you're stopping, you're picking up grips. And that starts to feel more normal. But now everybody has seen the picture so clearly, the precision is so correct that now on level three, you start to actually kind of flow through the whole thing. And you're not stopping as much. You see just as much, but you don't have to look as long, right? You see it, the break comes, you see a clean break, and you keep looking until there's a grip to pick up. So, but in that time, because you learned the pictures on 1 and 2, now you know, I've seen the pre-finished picture, I know this is going to be done. So you're able to anticipate just as much because you know where you're going to go, you don't have to stop as hard. So we're just kind of arriving and moving through things. And that's when it really starts to flow. There's no big stops and everybody just kind of moves through all the formations. And then 4 is speed. You add speed to that. But most of the problem most teams have, a lot of them, is they try to start at 3 because that's what they see the more experienced teams do. So they don't learn the pictures, they don't learn the habits, they don't learn the discipline as much. They're looking at the grips too soon, and now the levels are off, they're moving all over the place, and they're wondering what's wrong. And they start putting weights on because the levels are off when the fall rate's fine. But the levels are only off and they're out of position because they weren't looking long enough, because they're not familiar enough with the pictures. So that's how the stop drill is just the first part of that series of training.
That's really good advice. And for those of you who are in this meeting who are maybe just starting, and when Dan references keying, you might not necessarily know quite what he's talking about. Dan, can you just briefly tell us what keying is and which person on the team is responsible for keying?
A 4-way team and an 8-way team also. The best teams move like 4 parts of one machine. Everything is in perfect synchronicity. To do that, it's hard for everybody to see all the time that everything is complete. And it's important to have a person or the center of 2 people keying it. And the key is the signal to go to the next point, the signal that this is complete, we're moving on. And if everybody is on their own and that's not assigned to someone, then sometimes there's someone on the outside who keys to go. And even if the formation was there, everybody else wasn't looking, they don't see the person on the outside and they don't know the key came. Or someone is keying it before it's actually built. And as soon as that timing and that synchronicity breaks down, it's hard for the team to put it back together. So to keep that synchronicity, you want the keys to be coming from someplace that everybody can see, everybody can read. And with the training I was talking about, on the level 1, level 2, you can see during the transition, they're going to key it quickly. This build is perfect. The key is going to come fast, and you'll be able to anticipate it. And so you know it's coming, you can see it coming, and everybody stays in sync. It's not like the key comes and then the other guys get off. This is what keeps everybody together.
And so I guess if I'm a team member and I'm in my position waiting for the key, you said I'm focusing on anticipating the next move, the next formation, like before the key even happens. I'm anticipating that.
Yep.
So I'm ready to move.
You should be anticipating the key. And again, you can tell during the transition if it's going to be coming quickly, or you can tell during the transition there's someone who's completely out of position and it's not going to come. But you should keep your head, your attention is where the key is coming from, but your mind is on the next point. So you're ready to go.
That's something I'm going to have to practice. To me, doing a move and anticipating the next move in my head kind of sounds like, you know, patting my head and rubbing my tummy. But I think with some practice, that's some really good advice, because it's going to speed things up if you're already anticipating that next formation. So that was kind of the random drills that you talked about. And then in the next article series, so the fourth part of your series that you wrote for parachutists, you talk about block formations and some of the training for block formations. And for those of you who want to be able to reference these, they can be found in the Skydivers Competition Manual, Chapter 9, Appendices C and D, that has all of the four-way formations in it. But Dan, you said in the block formations, there's the midpoint picture. And what is the best way for a team to be able to use the midpoint picture as a training tool?
Great. So many of the blocks, just one example is two pieces, two of the same pieces doing 360s. Rarely are you ever going to be technically perfect every time. Actually, you're never going to be technically perfect every time. One time, you know, you're going to move a little too far and have a little too much space. The next time it's a little too close. There's many things happening, and it's never perfect. It's never perfect. But if you have this midpoint picture target, at the midpoint picture, everybody can see what they need to do in order to close the block, in order to finish it. And it may be different from what they planned, right? It may not be. It may be, well, I was going to go this direction, but I actually need to go that way. I was going to go, I was going to go under, but I'm over at the moment. So I've really got to get down. So you see those midpoint pictures, and it allows you to make any improvisations that you need to in order to make it work for any of the technical errors, which again, there's almost always, to some degree. They may be small, but it's rare that you're doing things perfectly. It's something you really need to focus on in the tunnel, because the tunnel, you can make mistakes in the tunnel, but still get away with it because you couldn't get too far away. Where the same mistake when you get in the air is now creates all sorts of space. So it's really good in the tunnel also to focus on those midpoint pictures and those targets, learn them then. And then when you first start doing the blocks, be very aware of them, and they'll give you the consistency you're looking for in the close of the blocks.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to live in Arizona for a while and watch Airspeed doing their dirt dives. And I remember noticing that during their dirt dives that they actually would, you know, like you were saying, if there's two pieces and they're each rotating 360 and then coming back together, they would actually dirt dive and do the 360, but kind of stop at the midpoint and then keep going, even though that's not really what they do in the sky. They don't technically stop at that point, but dirt diving, you could tell they would stop to kind of practice that, like, okay, this is where we're going to analyze where we're going to be coming together for the second point. So
and to them, they're not physically stopping, but the correct time, you know, the midpoint picture, you know, when you first learn the blocks, it's good to stop and see it. Just stop right there, see it, see where I need to go, what I need to do, and then close it. And the correct time to start the second part of the block is when you can see what you need to do, and you can see that the other piece is aware of it also. So airspeed.
Back to that communication you were talking about.
Exactly,
Everyone kind of knows
we're all
what needs to happen
agreement
before you move on.
Exactly. And airspeed and the other top teams, they still do that. but they recognize those pictures so much more quickly because they're trained so much more, they visualize so much more, they're more familiar with them. So they don't have to stop to recognize those pictures. They can see those pictures while they're in transition. And they've also done it enough where their technical mistakes are far smaller and fewer than most teams are. But new teams then see that and they see, well, they don't stop. They just run right through it. And then they try to imitate that, which you've got to put the training in long before you can just keep things moving like that.
So it's good to actually train stopping at that midpoint when you're a newer team.
When you're first learning the blocks, the first time you look at them, yeah.
Okay, good to know. We kind of talked about, staying calm during a skydive. And I know sometimes skydivers experience what we call brain lock. You kind of forget what the next formation is supposed to be. And that tends to make people panic a little bit, or at least me. So do you have any advice for if you are experiencing a brain lock, what do you do? I
have plenty of advice for that. Not that I've ever had it happen to me, but I've heard about this thing, brain locking. What's so funny is there is hundreds of mistakes that you can make in formation skydiving. There's tons of them. But the one that everybody fears is brain locking. Like that's the penalty. That's the worst one. And it's really no bigger or no different than any other mistake you're going to make. The brain lock itself doesn't usually cause a big problem. How individuals and teams respond to that brain lock is where the problem is. So first off, to train yourself to not brain lock, use the tool I was talking about in knowing when to anticipate the next point. Practice anticipating every dirt dive, every walkthrough, every visualization. Practice anticipating so that when you're on the jump, it just happens automatically. You don't have to try to remember to anticipate. But when a brain lock does happen, if everybody just stays calm and doesn't get freaked out about it, normally the person having the brain lock, if they're calm, will just pause. They'll look, they'll see 3/4 of a formation. Pretty good guess, that's the formation. They'll get back on and the team can pick right back up where they left off. And it really doesn't take a second. Doesn't take a second at all. But if they get too emotional about it and just start trying and guessing different things, or if the team gets frustrated and keys and goes, well, now they're on to the next point. This person hasn't even done that point. And now it's total chaos at that point. And the time to practice this, you see people dirt diving, teams dirt diving. And when they brain lock in the dirt dive, they practice freaking out. They practice having some emotional response. Like, I hate that. I hate when I do that. It's like, well, whatever you're practicing in the dirt dive is what you're training yourself to do. Or then you'll have the team that someone will tell them it's a bipole. What? Is that what you're going to do? So they're actually training and practicing the wrong response, both the individuals and the team. So in the dirt dive, especially the first dirt dive when everybody's going to brain lock because you don't know the jump yet, use that opportunity to practice how you're going to respond when you brain lock or when someone on your team does.
I never thought of the brain lock being the responsibility of the whole team, right? Like you're absolutely right. If the team freaks out and keys and moves on, they're not helping the situation. So if one individual is experiencing it, it's the responsibility of the whole team to react appropriately, not just waiting on the one person to figure it out. It's everyone's got to kind of stay calm and move on together.
And once the team and everybody is trained how to respond when you brain lock, then suddenly the brain locks aren't that big an issue anymore. Now, because they're not as big an issue, people aren't worried about them as much. Since they're not as worried about them as much, they're not having them as much. And brain locks become just a small one of the hundreds of different small mistakes that people can make.
That's also really good advice to practice them what happens during a dirt dive. And because the dirt dive is what you're practicing for that to happen in the sky. So yeah, if someone starts making fun of their team member for having a brain lock on the dirt dive, that's probably not a good response.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, so moving on, because we're mentioning dirt dives, in the 5th part of your series, this was October 2012, you kind of give a whole in-depth analysis to a dirt dive that I had never heard of before. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've been dirt diving wrong for so long. Because I just, go to the mock-up, do what we're going to do, and then move on, go in the loading area and get ready for the jump. But can you kind of break us down what a good dirt dive looks like?
It generally speaking, I watch a lot of teams and a lot of individuals, and they're just totally going through the motions. They're not actually practicing the jump the way they want it to happen. They're just, walking through it, just going through the motions, where realize that this is your chance to do exactly what you want to do in the air. One way or the other, you're rehearsing what you're going to do in the air. So you want to take that opportunity to rehearse it perfectly, to do it perfectly each time. So each part of the dirt dive has a very clear goal, a very clear goal. What are we trying to accomplish on this part of the dirt dive? And what do we do in order to accomplish it? So for instance, and again, lots of teams have different ways of doing it, but the way I like to do it, the first walkthrough, right? A team doesn't know. They just found out what the jump is, and it's the first walkthrough to learn the jump. Well, I like to have them walk it through like it's a stop drill, right? So you have the chance right then to reinforce all those good habits, all those good basics, reinforce the looking, the stopping, the anticipating, the gripping, all of it, right? And very often I see teams on the first walkthrough not looking at each other, not building all the formations. Half the time people are keying in before they're done. And I've said to them, man, what are you guys doing? You look up, pick your head up, look in, see everything that's going on. They're like, man, I'm just learning it. I'm just learning it right now. So I'll do that later. And it's like, well, you're learning it screwed up. You're practicing doing the wrong things right now. Now you're going to have enough of the dirt dive to undo the bad habits you just practiced doing, which you may have done it accidentally, but that's still what you did. So in the first dirt dive, I like to do it like it's a stop drill. And that's when people are going to brain lock because they don't know the jump. So that's the time to practice how to respond to brain locks, as we just talked about before. Use that opportunity. You're going to have them, practice them right. So every different stage of the dirt dive has very specific goals like this. Then when we go down, in four-way, we lay it down in the creepers. I like to do the creepers like a stop drill also, because creeping doesn't feel like a jump. Creeping is annoying as hell. Okay, it's a lot of work. It's not comfortable. There's nothing fun about it at all, but it shows you the exact pictures that you need to see. So I like to do it like a stop drill. And again, take really good grips, because get your hands used to taking the grips. Then on the last walkthrough, then the goal of that one is to walk the jump the way you actually want to do it. What's the feeling the jump is going to have? So have it feeling right on the line, that nice, smooth, walking through things, not stopping as much. So that you walk away from that last dirt dive feeling like, oh, I can't wait to go do this jump. This is going to be so much fun. I love this jump. But each part of the dirt dive has a specific goal and has what you're going to do in order to accomplish that goal. And it makes the dirt diving much, much quicker. It makes it much more productive. And you walk away ready to go.
And I'm trying to remember, I think you mentioned that last walkthrough, you're not talking. Is that right? You're like just doing the nonverbal communication with each other.
Absolutely. And most of the rest of it, you don't need to talk that much. Most of the time, it's better to shut up and just do it. Otherwise, you're down dirt diving all day long. So you can still talk, but only say what needs to be said. And then the last walkthrough, just walk it through. And if anything happens that's wrong, fix it. Practice fixing it. Practice continuing. I see a lot of teams that as soon as there is a brain lock or there's any kind of problem, they're done with the dirt lab. They all right, we're good, let's stop. Well, they just practice quitting in the middle of the jump when there's a problem. They didn't mean to practice it, but that's what they did. That's what they practiced. So that's it.
Awesome. I can't wait to use these for training. I hope some of the people in the audience feel the same way. So dirt diving is kind of a way that we can train without being in the tunnel or being in the sky. It's kind of like the free skydive training, right? You want to use it as much as possible. But something that you're big on, especially in this article series, is visualization. And I just want you to kind of talk about how you visualize, what good visualization looks like, and then when a skydiving team can be using that visualization.
You know, there's been plenty of books and plenty of articles written about the quality of visualization, how if for good quality visualization, your body and your mind really don't know the difference much between that and actually doing the activity. And in skydiving, it's especially important. You know, if I want to learn to play golf, I'm going to get 1,000 golf balls. I'm going to drop them down one at a time, and I'll practice putting or driving or whatever for 1,000 times in a row. In skydiving, we don't get to do that. We could be out jumping our butts off all day long, make 10 jumps. We've got about 10 minutes of free fall, of which we have seconds of that with any particular move. That's just not enough. That's not how you get repetitions on things. And the tunnel is terrific. The tunnel is great, but it's still not the complete skydive. And learning how to visualize it can add so many more repetitions, so much more practice. I've seen teams that did 100 practice jumps, but were very good with visualization, and they looked like they made 500 jumps. And teams who made 500 jumps who didn't visualize at all and looked like they made 100. But it's a skill to visualize well. You need to be able to create the picture in your mind. That's what visualization is. It's creating the picture in your mind of something that you want to replicate in reality. And the more clearly you can see that picture, the more likely you are to be able to go and actually do it. And I mean, for me, I spent a lot of time really learning to see these pictures. And I would learn to see it from above, the way the video is going to be watching it. I would learn to see it from within, what it's going to look like to me. I'd learn to see it from my clone's spot. So what I'm going to look like while I'm doing it. And to the point that on the way to altitude, I can see it perfect. I visualize the whole way up. I can feel the jump. I can feel the calmness. I can feel what it's going to look like on the line. I can feel and what it's going to feel like on the line. I can feel the energy of it. So it's not just the pictures. It becomes a full sensory experience. And you get ready to jump out of the airplane and you're, man, I got this. I just did it 100 times on the way to altitude. Or your visualization skills aren't very good. You're on the way up and you're trying to see it, and you can't even imagine having a good jump. You can't even pretend to. So bad visualization skills can do as much damage as good visualization skills can do good. But it's the key to skydiving. There's no way we'll ever be able to make enough jumps or have enough tunnel time to be able to not take advantage of the visualization.
Yeah, I really like that you mentioned seeing yourself or seeing the jump not just from your point of view, because I think that's what I tend to do when I visualize, is I'm kind of picturing what I'm going to see during the jump, but then actually seeing it from the camera person's point of view and seeing it from my teammates' point of view, what I'm going to look like, changing that, I guess, like camera angle of different viewpoints of the jump. So you're getting like the full picture. I think that's really cool and a really good way to practice in your mind for free.
and it's hard to really be good at it. It's a skill to actually be able to create those pictures in your mind. It's a skill. And in my book and in the notes, I believe it talks about how to do it and how to teach yourself to do it. But yeah, it takes time. It takes time and commitment, just like any of the other jumping does.
Yeah, we could go on and on about visualization because I think it's really cool, but you're right. Pick up his book, give it a read, or read this article series and you'll get many more tips on good visualization techniques. All right, so then we've talked about the dirt dive and training. A lot of teams know that it's super important to do a debrief together as a team after you're done training. So what are some of your do's and don'ts of a debrief as a team?
The first do is always see the positive things first. We have the tendency as human beings and skydivers, we could go up and have, 40 seconds of great skydiving and 5 seconds of crap and come down and think nothing but the crap. What did we do? Slow motioning the 5 seconds of every little thing that went wrong. And you don't want to avoid the things that went wrong, but that can't be your primary focus. I would turn it around the other way and really focus on what you did right. Because the answer to how to fix what you did wrong is usually in what you did right. So if you're doing a jump that has solo 360s in it, so maybe block 14 in 4-way, and you did it 5 times on that jump and you did it right once and you screwed it up 4 times, well, rather than looking at the 100 different things you did wrong on the 4 times that you screwed it up, look at the 1 time you nailed it. What did you do that time? What was working that time? What it takes to make it work is much simpler and fewer things than all the different ways you can screw it up. So first and foremost, focus on the positive, not just because it makes us feel better, but because the answer of how to fix the other things is usually in there. And the other thing is when you are helping each other, right? You may have advice for someone else. And I mentioned this earlier. Be sure that you know what you're talking about before you offer advice to someone, one of your teammates, on how to do something better. Sometimes just out of enthusiasm, we just throw things out there. But I know for me, if I have a teammate tell me, here's a way to fix this, I'm very possibly going to believe it. And if he's wrong, then I'm going to spend some time really trying to do the wrong move and not do the correct fix. So you need to be careful with the information that you offer. So it's fine to be able to say to each other, here's what I think you need to do, but be sure that you've got a really good idea of what you're talking about. And third thing, just to try to summarize it all, is never be defensive. Don't get defensive. You're going to feel defensive. You're going to want to be defensive. You're going to want to put up a big shield. When you feel that happening, just don't be a wuss. Don't be defensive. There's nothing to be gained by it at all. You've got people on the team who should be your friends, who are, if they're offering you advice or guidance, they're only doing it because they really want to help. Hear what they have to say, take it into consideration. If you don't agree with it, don't use it. You get to make the choice, but don't be defensive. Don't let everything become an argument in every dirt dive. So those would be the 3 things, if I had to summarize, I would focus on.
Okay. We're getting close to being out of time, and I want people to be able to ask questions as well as my questions that I have. But just the last thing was in the 6th part of the article series, you kind of put all of this together, all of these little pieces that we've talked about. And you talk about, some of the training days. And one of the things you talk about is a stretch day. And so just quickly tell us what a stretch day is and how a team can incorporate it into their training.
Teams usually train for what is ideal for training, right? What allows us to maintain our energy through the day, get the number of jumps we want to get in as efficiently as possible. The training is designed for training. And then you get to the nationals, and it's weather holds and other things that are going on, and you're actually on the drop zone for 12 hours and you do 3 jumps. Or there's weather for a few days and then you do 10 jumps in a day. You do the entire meet in one day. I've done both of these things, but you never would have. A lot of times you haven't trained for these things. So if you have the opportunity, and if you have the chance to do it, it's good to have some training days, which aren't built around what's the best way for training, but what's the best way to actually stretch what we're capable of and what we're comfortable with, so that we're ready when we get to the meet, when things aren't. The meet will not be what's ideal for your training. Whatever you did in training, that won't be what's happening in the competition. So it's good to mix it up a little bit. So even if what you did on the stretch days isn't what was at the meet, at least it got you out of your comfort zone, made you try to keep it together on days that weren't ideal for training.
I think that's great advice. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes. If anyone in the chat has any questions, I don't know if we've see. Oh, we do have some. Gotta scroll up to the top because there's a few.
I think Lucas was the first up.
Lucas, okay. Oh, I see a Donaciano. What do you think is the most challenging aspect of starting four-way? So the most challenging part of starting it, and how do you suggest approaching it?
The most challenging part is finding a team. That's the most challenging part. And when you find a team, it may not be, you have to find 4 people who can agree on the same goal. What do we want to do with this? And it's never going to be that everybody comes with the same goal. There may be one person who shows up and, man, I want to do 400 jumps, and another one who wants to do 50. Well, what can you agree on? And maybe it's going to be less than what one person wanted to do, maybe more than another. But when you're putting your plan together and what you're asking from each other, what the goals are going to be, make sure that everybody is in agreement on it. And that's the biggest trick. That's the biggest trick.
All right, someone else said visualization equals superpower. I agree with that. Yeah. Keith says, keep slight forward movement during paused and break parts of four-way and keep blood sugar in check. Is that things you would agree on? No, that's a question or advice. Let's see, where can we find this article series? We did add it to the chat, but after this webinar is done, we send out an email, usually about 24 hours later, that has the recorded video so you can watch it again. And it also will have all of these associated articles that we've been referencing, as well as the Skydivers competition manual. So we'll give you guys a heap of stuff in an email for resources. Okay, Nathaniel says, hi Dan, thanks for answering our questions here tonight. What can teams do to stay productive on training weekends that might be weathered out, or when otherwise you wouldn't be able to jump?
Practice dirt diving. I have, for teams I'm on, teams that I've coached, a very specific dirt dive plan. And you need to get good at that. You need to understand the plan. You need to get good at executing the plan. Your days will be so much more efficient. Your dirt dives will be so much more productive with a purpose, with a goal in the dirt dives. But they require practice. I would spend the first bad weather day learning to do that.
Yeah, I feel like I learned a lot from reading these article series, and there's things that I'm going to bring to my team about, visualizing, and we can re-debrief some of the jumps that we've done using the techniques that you've talked about. So I think there's a lot of stuff that, my team can do on the ground without having to jump, just based on what you've written, Dan.
And there's times where, if the weather holds really long, it's also good to just make sure you go have some fun together. I mean, if the weather is just crap and there's not much you can do, well, whatever, go see a movie, go have dinner, go bowling, see who can get the ball down the lane fastest. Forget the pins, just race the ball down the lane. Have some fun.
That's awesome. Okay, someone asked, Stephen asked, are there any good drills for improving hill work?
Jumping.
Yeah. Yeah.
The biggest thing on the hill is the awareness, right? Everybody needs to, you need to, as much as you look at each other and look at things during the jump, on the hill, you need to look more. Those halfway pictures are more important on the hill, because on the hill is where it's not going to be exactly as you planned. There's more things to fix on the hill, so you need to be more aware. And people just get too grippy on the hill and don't pay enough attention. So all the things I talked about times 10 on the hill.
Okay. Ken asks, what is the path to competing in four-way at a high level? Are there any specific camps that one should go to?
The path is to get on a team, start a team. There is, if you don't have a team, get to as many tunnel camps, as many opportunities. I know they've got camps all around the country where you have a chance to really experience four-way, but until you have a team, you can't really experience it. Big part of four-way is getting to be with the same group all the time, knowing how they fly, knowing how they move, being able to, that communication we talked about, that doesn't happen with people you haven't seen before. You get this communication with people who you've looked at a lot. You can read the glance in their eyes. So more than anything, yes, the camps are good. Yes, all those other things are good. Get on a team.
And I think also I would just add my 2 cents is once you have a team, getting some coaching. If you can't go to camps, having some a coach like Dan, or there's others that you can actually come and they can help your team in the tunnel, or they help you through your dirt dives and that sort of thing.
Don't rewrite the whole book. There's lots of great coaches out there. They'll be able to plan your training. They'll be able to steer you in the right direction. Yeah, you're completely wasting your time if you're starting off new without having a coach to help you along.
Okay.
We have one question, George, that I think it was a direct message.
Oh,
for
okay.
you, Dan. Question, not all team members might be at the same level. How do you break it to them that they need to bring up their game in a way that won't make them angry, self-conscious, and destroy the team dynamic?
There is no team that everybody starts at the same level. That's just how it is. But with a good team, they will be at a similar level more quickly than you think. As I said, for years, I was the most experienced person on the team. Several years in a row, started new teams with completely new people where I was just way more experienced than they were, way more skilled than they were. After a few hundred jumps, not so much anymore. So just understand, you may be the one who's the most experienced at the time, but you won't be for long. Everybody who, and you want to continue to push yourself also. Don't sit back and relax because you think, I've got this all nailed and these guys are learning. Everybody is learning. Everybody's got to be putting in 100% all the time. But teams level off pretty quickly. So that disparity amongst the skill and of teammates won't last for long.
All right. I can't pronounce your name. I don't want to say it wrong, so I'm just going to read the question. He says, it is always good listening to you, Dan. As I am progressing slowly for the big way, what is your advice for hyperthermia and oxygen level for high altitude jumps? I'm sure that I will learn and upgrade my skills during the big way camp. So kind of a little side note from competitive four-way, but we got Dan, so we got to ask him now, what's the tip?
Well, don't freeze, right? So do what you need to do. Do what you need to do to keep your temperature where it needs to be. And anywhere that you go, they should have oxygen if you're going to an altitude that you're going to need it. Conserve your energy level in the airplane. You don't want to waste the energy and require more oxygen because you're exerting more energy than you need to. So stay as calm and as quiet as you can possibly be. Stay on the oxygen. Think about how you're breathing to make sure you're getting as much as you can. Keep calm and quiet and stay on the oxygen as long as you possibly can before you exit. I see sometimes people get off it on the green light or the red light and it's gone by then. You want to be breathing it until you're going out the door.
Okay, good side note question and good side note answer. It's 8:30 on the dot. Let's just go for one last question. Akash asks, any suggestions that can help improve four-way exits? And I kind of think this is similar to what you said about training for the hill, but
understand a four-way team when they're in the door is a funnel waiting to happen. All right, everybody is, if you just hop off like you are, it's like everybody is laying on their side, stacked on top of each other. So you want to take the formation from the door and you want to put it out on the hill, right? So it's going to have a certain angle. It's going to be where exactly you want to put the formation. You don't just hop out and face the wind. You want to determine exactly where we put in this formation so that everybody knows where they need to be. So they're going to a particular spot when they leave the airplane. And the only way you'll know if it is on the hill where it's supposed to be is if you're looking. So you want to get that eye contact in the door across the formation. So you know as soon as you leave, did we put this where we want to? And if not, what we need to do to fix it. Too often people are just hopping out and arching and they're not looking. So they can't tell what needs to be fixed. And there's a lot of formations that should fly, but then funnel because people don't have the awareness. So know where you're going to put the formation and where you're looking so you know if you did or not and can figure out how to fix it if necessary.
Awesome. Great advice. There's a few more people with questions and I hate to cut it off, but we have been taking Dan's time for an hour now. So thank you so much for talking with us about all this. And like I said, everyone who joined, you will get an email probably tomorrow with a link to this video, as well as all of the resources that I mentioned, the articles that Dan wrote that talk about all of these pieces that we put together tonight. And then if you haven't read it already, Dan has written this book. I highly recommend it. I'm reading it now. And so it's some of that advice is in here too. Anything else, Dan?
Guys, this is my 39th year at the Nationals. I don't have a team I've been practicing with this year, but it is such a great experience to go, to be amongst that family of people, to go and do some great jumps with friends. It's a fabulous experience, and all the different years that I did teams, which is pretty much 20 years in a row. I don't regret 1 second of it. It was just so much fun. It was such a great personal challenge for my own skydiving, as well as for me to grow and try to become a more decent human being, which I had a lot of work to do. So, but it's a fabulous, fabulous experience. I know you won't regret it. So I encourage everybody to put something together. Thank you, guys.
Yep. Thank you. And if you come to Nationals, I'll be there. Make sure you come and say hi. And Dan, I'll be seeing you there.
Great.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.